Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and a certified informational privacy professional, and I help provide practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, Justin Daniels here. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I do that through identifying the problem and coming up with practical solutions. I'm a cybersecurity expert and business attorney.
And this episode is brought to you by Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, e-commerce, media agencies, and professional and financial services. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there is greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more, visit redcloveradvisors.com.
And I'm like surrounded by the C-suite today. I have CEO here, and we have Jana Schmidt with us today, who's an active board member of Girl Talk, Inc., a nonprofit dedicated to inspiring all girls to be confident leaders through peer-to-peer mentoring programs. Throughout her career, she has served startups, mid-size, and mature fintech and martech companies in the financial services, payments, retail, and energy industries. Her expertise lies in building and leading world-class leadership teams to create and execute strategy for short and long-term value. I give you, with no further ado, the C-suite with Jana Schmidt. Good morning, Jana.
Good morning, Justin. Good morning, Jody. I'm proud of what you're doing with your women-led business and attacking privacy from your unique perspective. So congratulations on your business. And Justin, it's so nice to meet you. I've heard great things about you for years. And one other thing I would note is I am also on a board of a public board, WebBank, which is an industrial bank that supports a lot of fintechs in their need for a bank charter. So I get to see how a traditional bank, industrial bank in this case, helps provide its services to all of these really innovative fintech companies and how they are leveraging banking services in the US in particular and providing services to people who want untraditional banking relationships or need a different level of access to credit or what we call the alternatively served. They're just looking to do things differently. So, and that really entertains this notion of cybersecurity for sure when you're looking at fintech and how it connects into the banking system.
Absolutely. I can imagine that keeps you and the company very busy.
It does. Cybersecurity, in all honesty, I've got to disclaim that my husband is the CEO of a cybersecurity company, provides managed services. And so, listen, this is something that I get in my private life all the time. But in my public life, as the CEO of two big data companies, one was NG Impact. We had energy data from 700,000 US buildings that needed to be protected and needed to be managed and stored and leveraged properly. And then as the CEO of Harland, Clarke, where we were doing business with some 8,000 financial institutions with enormous amounts of private data, the importance of taking care of that data in that scenario was huge. And in fact, our entire reputation rested in both companies on us doing it well. So this was a C-suite topic all the time. And as a board member, it's a board topic, but I think after 2020, it's going to be even more so. So I'm glad to talk about it because I think the implications of how we do business and the way we treat data and protect our customers' information is going to become an explosively more important topic as we move forward.
Well, I'm just first so excited that there's another house that talks about privacy and security as much as our house.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Anything I do, I get told how weak my password is and what I should be doing stronger. It's like I'm just on Nordstrom.com and my husband's over my shoulder, assuring me of what I'm doing wrong all the time. So I can't escape him.
Well, wonderful. Well, let's get started with understanding a little bit about how you found your way to these CEO roles, talking so much about data privacy and security. So kind of unwind to the beginning of your career and kind of help us understand, Jana, and what you've done along the way.
Great. Well, I grew up on the sales and marketing side for, some 20 years of my career, but always had a strong interest in operations. And I got a lot of education in Six Sigma and Lean and things that really helped me to understand how an ecosystem works. So whatever I sold and however I sold it had real implications in our ability to serve our customer well. And that's really where my heart lies, is in the market and serving clients well. And the ability to manage data in that quest was not something I thought about in the 90s when I was in sales or even in marketing, as I took over as head of sales and marketing. But as I took over operations and ultimately became the CEO, I knew one thing, that our clients' trust was at the heart of what I loved. I loved doing things that made my clients better. And I started to learn the risk associated with improper management of data. And for me, there would have been no greater heartbreak than to disappoint my clients and to lose their trust because we didn't do the right things right when it came to handling data. So I grew up in sales and marketing, took over operations in the early 2000s and became CEO ultimately in 2014 of the energy analytics company, and then came back to Harland Clarke in 2017. And we used to, at Harland Clarke, we'd have major banks that you would know their names, and we would have their teams show up and spend 4 or 5 weeks on site doing end-to-end testing of our data practices. And it became a competitive advantage for us because when you have tier 1 financial institutions signing off on your data practices, it became a real sellable asset for us. Talk about we do the right things right. But I think all of us have to take a big step back after the SolarWinds Microsoft Exchange attack we saw just recently. I don't know that I'm reading this book, Think Again by Adam Grant. I have it right here. And as the CEO and board member, I'm telling you, you can become very pat yourself on the back because you think you're doing the right things right. But the question is, have we thought of everything? And I think that's going to be the quest, is people are digitizing everything right now. Have we thought of everything? And my guess is we're going to have to think again about it and start back with legacy systems. As a CEO, you're looking at a capital budget for the next year. So for 2021, how much money do I spend on innovation and new products and new technology? And how much do I spend on technical debt of legacy systems? And I can tell you, all the fun stuff is in the innovation and the new solutions, but all the risk is in those legacy systems that you don't want to spend a lot of money on. They're not doing anything other than, in some cases, keeping the lights on or running old products and services that you haven't sunsetted, but they are where the risk really exists in my mind, and the things we don't do enough with, that we're going to have to spend more of those precious dollars taking care of.
So, Jana, it's interesting to hear you say these things because it's so consistent with the view that Jody and I have, that cybersecurity and privacy are strategic business enterprise risks. And you talk about SolarWinds, and I know you've represented companies from startups to mid-size, CEO of large companies. And so I'm going to ask this question, which is, given what you understand, why is it then in the last 3 months, I've handled 3 different ransomware events, and their incident response plan amounted to, we'll call Justin and we'll figure it out when it happens, opposed to your very proactive approach from a C-suite, as you well know. You set the tone for the organization. If it's important to Jana and she communicates that to the organization, it's important to the organization. Yet we seem to have this disconnect at that level. Any insight you can provide? Because you talk to other board members in C-suite. What is it that maybe I'm missing?
I don't think you're missing anything. I feel like, because I actually had a ransomware attack at one of the companies I was CEO of, and it's paralyzing. And it is so dangerous. And you just don't believe it can actually happen to you until your code is being held hostage and at ransom. And I think that what do they say? There's some percent of learning you can have from seeing. There's some percent of learning you can have by hearing. And there's a huge amount of learning you can have from experiencing it. Sadly, experiencing it is something that makes it go from the the Chief Information Security Officer's plate to the CEO's plate. Also, I think the new laws that came out around data management in California and New York and all that became a tier 1 project for our organization because the implications were so high if consumers complained about the way you're managing their data and the penalties associated with that. It was really just a great unknown. Like, could this paralyze your company if, someone asks you to delete all of their information and you miss one legacy system and it's somehow exposed? And what are the implications of class action lawsuits and that kind of thing? I do think that sadly made it more of a, we don't want to have risk and we don't want to have unknown exposure. And those with California and New York, and of course, out of the European Union, the privacy laws that came, they started really becoming very known risk. But having had a ransomware attack, like you said, Justin, I probably would have had that. Just call Justin and see what he says. But in today's environment, you have to have a full action plan, just like you would disaster recovery. If a site goes down or whatever, what are you going to do when these malware or ransomware attacks affect? And by the way, it's your ecosystem too. So it may not affect your company, but it is a supplier in the ecosystem. Those connected parts affect you just as much. So what are you going to do, and how are you looking at their plans for attacks? Because data is now housed in, we serve our customers in a very API oriented ecosystem way. So how are you looking at all that end to end? Boy, that's not easy. And we've got to get a lot smarter about it.
You're smirking.
I know, because I know who she's married to. I know what he does. And with your experience, I can only imagine the conversations, Jana. So yesterday at our school, Jody was en route and they said, I got a text saying, hey, there's been a gas main break. Come back.
Gas leak.
Yeah. Excuse me. And Jody's like, I didn't get one. And my first thought is, of course, did someone hack the school's communication system?
So I'm going round and round in Atlanta.
Suspicion.
Go to school, come back. Go to school, come back. But that is how our house thinks. Is there's a hack.
And then we posted on Facebook as a joke, and then people were like, I had never thought about that. And then I realized once you get out of your little cybersecurity bubble and you talk to people who aren't immersed or haven't suffered ransomware or as educated as you are, you just have this disconnect until, of course, you have the ransomware. But I guess I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about what you're doing now. And you're a board member of Girl Talk, and love to get your perspective on why it's important to you as a board member to help girls be aware of cybersecurity when they're online.
That's a great question. In fact, probably something we need to talk more about at Girl Talk. At WebBank, we talk about it all the time because you think about the banking infrastructure, and actually they're extremely responsible, and it's that end-to-end testing at WebBank that I know that they're thinking through it all the time. But when it comes to our personal data and the way we share information online, and the ability to create deep fakes and social engineering and all of these things, boy, isn't it scary what can happen to us in sharing personal information. And in today's society, even if someone was able to embed a deep fake or something that is attributed to your social network somehow, jobs could be lost, all sorts of things can happen. So it doesn't even have to be that you said it, but are you exposing yourself to it by sharing too much information? I love someone, and actually our daughters, listen, I am married to a suspicious, cynical person when it comes to this stuff. So, but I
wonder why you get it.
Yeah. Well, I share it too. And I saw one of my daughters on Facebook shared one of those where it's like, tell us about, your first house and all that. But in it, she was like, and the hackers love this. So she was actually saying, this is why it's so stupid to do that. So I was so proud of her. I thought this is a growth moment for our family where our kids are actually sharing themselves how social media can overshare information that creates the ability to do reconnaissance. In fact, Jody, you shared an article today about metadata and the ability to do reconnaissance on PDFs and even Excel, and how much information we leave out there that can be brought together to aggregate and create almost absolute knowledge about a person. So with Girl Talk, actually, you're making a really good suggestion, Justin. We talk about financial literacy. We talk about networking. We talk about, creating strong women leaders. But what we have done is move Girl Talk from an in-person setting to a digital one. And so the discussion about digital protections would be an amazing addition to our curriculum for Girl Talk. So I'm really glad you suggested it. I will give you credit for it, as I have a board meeting next week, and it's an important thing for us to discuss.
Yeah, with us, we have two girls who are, a young one and one itching for a phone. And
TikTok.
Well, just any type of a phone. And we're any of the types of devices that they're using, whether it's for school or just basic communication with people, we're, as you would imagine, a little bit hypersensitive to how she's engaging. But the knowledge and the peer pressure that the girls today are going to have of, they have, everyone else has a phone. And so of course she wants a phone, but then everyone else is going to be on TikTok or insert the latest trend of whatever that is. And to help create that education, much like how your daughter knew to not share that information on social media, that's the same situation we need to have here is how to get them to understand the risks are real. It's not just these annoying adults sharing all of these types of things, but to kind of break them from the attachment, which is a whole different conversation.
Yes. But
truly the privacy and security risks, because you can't erase them. They're here. Yeah. The trail follows you. Like we've talking about with the metadata, it follows you wherever they are. So it truly is I feel very passionate about this particular topic and protecting kids online. And I think especially girls, I think they're especially vulnerable to it as well.
I agree completely. And honestly, it's something we need to do more about within our family, but sharing podcasts like this with our girls to show how it can actually happen. I think to share the consequences. Again, you can only learn so much, but to see how easy it is to download a game that has ads and things that are totally inappropriate, or to accept an invitation from someone. I saw a deep fake yesterday that it was a girl. It looked like a girl, and she was maybe in her late teens, and she had all these millions of followers or whatever it was. She was actually a he, and it was a 50-year-old man that was posing as this girl. But you could not tell it. And I think, how are we in the world are we going to teach people to not trust their eyes, and so how are we going to see the deep fakes and how unreal they are when they look so real? And so it's almost like our senses are not good enough to trust anymore, because things can be, we were talking about Zoom, how we can make ourselves look better. I can apply fake makeup or whatever it might be. How do you trust what's real? And how do you teach people to have that suspicion when it's so prevalent today?
Speaking of the fake lips, somehow my lipstick is back and I haven't done anything.
It's the AI.
Has it gone to you?
So, Jana, based on what you're saying there, I guess I want to ask you a question to get your perspective. So we're talking about the deep fake because obviously we're talking about technology. And you've worked in multiple businesses that have leveraged technology to have a competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we have what I like to call this inconvenient necessity of managing privacy and security. And this deep fake is a great example because that technology exists. It can be used for both positive and negative. And so from your perspective, how do we drive this growth? Because companies are going to continue to use technology, but yet find a better balance with the privacy and the security that are inconvenient, but very necessary.
Yes, like I said, when you're sitting with a capital budget and you're saying, how much money can I spend? And traditionally, we've said, okay, how much is going to go to technical debt and to maintenance of old systems, that kind of thing, and how can I make that as small as possible so I can invest as much in, creating new technology that advances my company and helps me grow and sell more services. But and historically, when the CISO is sitting at the table, it's like, how much can I give you that meets the need for a more secure environment, but not a dollar more? That has been, I think, our historic approach. So it's, okay, here's all the things we could do to protect ourselves. Okay, and here's a rational amount of that, and I think this is good enough. But as we look at some systems residing in legacy applications on premise, other things moving to a private cloud, others moving to a public cloud or some hybrid of that, the CISO is going to have such a more difficult job telling us where it is enough to spend and not a dollar more, because there's so much unknown in that. So I think that CISO, you mentioned earlier, is now a C-level. It's not like under the COO or somewhere pushed down. The CEO needs to know exactly what's happening in terms of privacy and security, because it's their job. I remember when Target got hacked by that, I think it was an HVAC person who had access in. I trembled a bit at that, because I thought, first of all, I was at the energy analytics company and we did business with companies like that. And I thought, is there any way our software, which resided within their systems, could allow for some backdoor attack? So number one is like, oh my goodness, could that happen to us? And number two, that would be my job, right? And in today's environment with CEOs, it's more, it's so much more complex. So I don't know as much as their job as it was with the Target hack, which seemed very linear to, you had an attack, the CEO's gone. I mean, the Microsoft Exchange attack, Satya Nadella is still there, but I think he's ringing in the warning about the complexity of these attacks, the importance of patches being applied, and that CISO needs to sit at the table and tell us, when you look at all these systems, this is how much money it's going to cost to protect it. And the risk is far more real, I would say. It's not just like life insurance when you're in your 40s. It's fine to have it, probably not going to need it. With the type of insurance we're talking about that comes from security and privacy practices, chances are really good you're going to need it in some way. And so the spend is going to go up, and that is going to be a tougher thing, because it doesn't mean innovation happens more slowly, because we're having to divert costs, or we're going to have to match costs and security with that innovation. But also, guess what? Those legacy systems that we do as little as we can to maintain, those are probably more scary where the risk comes from. And so as CEO, one thing that you do is, too often you keep those legacy systems because you may only have one or two people running them. They don't cost much to maintain. All your costs are depreciated. You just kind of hang on and hope they work. And as I'm the CEO again of a company, I'm going to get rid of that stuff. Like, I'm going to have to spend the money to get rid of it, because it presents an everyday risk of some kind of cyber attack, because you're not maintaining it the way you should in too many cases. And so it's not a matter of keep it perpetually because it's all been depreciated. It's sitting there as a cyber risk, and you got to get rid of it.
I have something to say.
Well, then you should say it.
You want to say it at the same time? No. I know, we're both so excited.
Go. Ladies first.
I have to, that was so gracious. I have to say, I really liked how you recognized and are pointing out to people. So often people are looking at the cost, just the finite technical cost. Legacy system costs this to remove and replace. That's too much. We won't do that. But instead, the cost on another side of a potential risk, that is greater than the technical piece. And people really need to understand and pay attention to that. That's a very different philosophy than I think many people are thinking. And I'm really excited that you highlighted that. So I that's what I wanted to share.
So I will
tell you, I just saw PwC just came out with a report yesterday. At least I saw it yesterday. It may have been out sooner, but it asked CEOs globally what their greatest concerns were. And the number one was health, pandemic related, but number two is cybersecurity. Right. Do you see that? And that to me was a bit shocking, to be honest with you. It was like way more than climate change. Climate change did increase, but not that significantly. As much as we're talking about it in the news, I thought that there would be a much greater appreciation for investing in climate change based on that. Cybersecurity, number two, before taxes, before policies. that tells me we all are recognizing the complex nature of this ecosystem and how much risk there is. If a SolarWinds is sitting and has been, what was that? It was nascent for a year or more before they noticed it. That they're probably as good as any of us at looking for that stuff, and they didn't detect it. What are we doing? I think it was a real wake-up call, and for it to have moved up that much in that report, CEO report, was a bit shocking. What did you think of it, Justin?
I guess, Jana, from my perspective, and I deal with a lot of companies who aren't fortunate to have someone who thinks about security the way that you do, or even has a CISO. And so I thought it was interesting, but I still see a gap with a lot of companies between what they say about security and what they actually do when it comes to implementing things, because you can't have policies and procedures and write your way to being in a good place. You have to just roll up your sleeves and do it. And I still feel we have a persistent gap with that. And that's why getting your perspective, I think, is so refreshing. It's how do I get other people in the C-suite at other companies to think more the way that you do? And unfortunately, in my experience, the way that happens is once they've had ransomware, they are reborn in how they think about security, because to your point, it is paralyzing. And the thing that got me when you talked about your last comment about the legacy systems, I have a ransomware case in the last 3 months where there was a server circa 2003, and you can't put any kind of threat to endpoint detection on it because nothing will work with it. It's just too old. So now you have this legacy system, to your point, and now if you get into an area where you've got to go and find out how the threat actor got in and where they went, you can't get any window into that system because there's nothing that will work with it, just flat out.
Yes. I mean, old BB6 systems we built in the 90s and all of that. And that's why I think, like I was saying, when your cost benefit analysis of shutting one of those systems down, it's always tipped towards, just let it be. It doesn't require much, but it's just a sitting time bomb. May not be a too strong a word, but like you said, I mean, I think investment in security monitoring and tools is essential, but some of these systems simply don't even allow for it. And in many of the cases, the people who built them don't even work there anymore. So how do you disassemble and disaggregate where it could have happened, where you have people with very little knowledge of the system anymore? So to me, though, that's going to be a big priority for us, in business, is to reduce our risk, not by just putting security monitoring on top of it, but by getting rid of the risk, getting rid of those systems. And it's going to take a chunk of money. And does that slow innovation? I don't know. But some of the digital tools we're using, I hope, as we've digitized, could reduce the cost to serve our customers. And some of that reduction in cost can be redeployed towards cybersecurity.
So given who you're married to,
yes,
I'd love to hear your thoughts on what your best personal cyber tip is for our listeners.
So really and truly, I think that what I do know and what my husband has pounded in my head, but I've also experienced firsthand as a CEO and as a board member, is that humans are still the greatest risk. Those emails that come that ask someone to go buy Apple gift cards, all of that, we would do things all the time to test our employees and how many would act on that. And, there was one case where I personally was like, I'm going to get dressed because, my CEO at the time of the holding company asked me to go get something. And it was like not unusual for him to ask for weird things like this because we were in retail services. And my husband was like, let me just look at that first. So anyway, when I think about it, it's about what do I do personally? And I do think passwords are such an important piece of it. And I do get like how strong my passwords are. So I think with my kids and all of that, we have a regular conversation about changing our passwords. Your dog plus your birth date and how risky that is. And so my personal tip is having great passwords. I think that's the thing I think about the most, because it's that reconnaissance and the ability to piece together where I've used different pieces that gives hackers so much access to the total me. And so how do I make that harder as hard as possible for them to take all those disaggregated pieces and compile them to a picture of me.
Well, when you are not managing privacy and security,
or your husband isn't talking to you about
the
weakness of your password because you have to show no weakness.
Exactly. You know it.
What do you like to do for fun?
First of all, that husband of mine that I've talked about, I love him deeply, and I love being with him. And during this pandemic, we have started walking all the time. We've got 2 black labs, both of them around here somewhere. And so we walk almost every day, and I cherish that so much. We love playing tennis. We do that a lot. We're just trying to focus more on our health and on our appreciation for this blessed life we live, and get away from the news, get away from, sedentary habits that come from working too much, and try to remember to take better care of ourselves. So it's what we do for fun, but it also is, investing in our own health and in our longevity. And I'm really excited to get to share that with my husband.
Well, thanks for sharing. Maybe one day we'll pass you with our large white dog and see you on the trail.
I would love that.
I promise I won't ask you about how strong or weak your password is.
No, I had to do one this morning for the iFit, for the treadmill. My husband, Jeff, shut me out of it. So I had to get a new password. He's like, share your password with me. You're not going to compromise the treadmill because you had to create a crappy password. It's like, seriously, I really do love this man, but he really does drive me crazy. But if it makes me a better leader, all the better for that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. If people would like to connect with you and learn more, where can they do that?
LinkedIn is great. Jana Schmidt on LinkedIn. I don't even know what that is. Or they can send me an email at janamschmidt@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you both.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.